Let me check the stream just to double check.
Yeah. All right, just continuing to talk for testing purposes, making sure the sounds and volumes are all good.
Yeah, I can hear you. Let's see if you can hear me. Say something again.
All right, just continuing to talk. Hyped for the second
Sweet.
week.
I think that's good.
All righty.
Take out preseason from the title. We're just week 2
Oh,
now.
a sec.
It's just spring
Spring
season.
season. Yeah. Alrighty, updated. Alrighty.
All right, welcome back to week 2 of the 2021 Spring Gauntlet. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new, my name is Matsu, and this podcast is also uh, hosted by my friend here, John. And we just talk about all things anime, specifically the seasonal anime that are not sequels. If you're new, what we do is we grab almost all the shows that do not have sequels, or rather are not a sequel, and we watch all the episodes from 1 week. So last week we watched all the first episodes, and we went on to discuss what we thought were great. And every week we drop shows. Last week we dropped 4 shows, and again today we'll be dropping 4 shows once again to determine the best of the best anime when we hit that week 12 slot. So, how are you
Yeah.
doing, John?
Doing good. Doing good. Excited to talk about the animes this week. It's always there's always a little bit more substance that you can now talk about when you have 2 episodes instead of 0 for the first week or 1 for the previous week. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think we didn't have too much trouble deciding the shows that we were gonna drop. I think
Yes.
we kind of knew which shows we're definitely gonna
Yeah.
drop, and then we didn't really care what else
Yeah.
would we
Exactly.
drop. But I think at least I'm feeling we're starting to get to a point where, oh no, there's gonna be a show that I like that has to be dropped.
Yeah, or even if it's not necessarily like I like it all the way, like there's like enough positives to be curious to
Yeah,
continue
you're
to
excited
watch.
for it.
Like yeah, or like you're just at the very least like kind of like, oh, I want to see where this goes, and eventually as we continue through the gauntlet, these types of the types of shows that will be dropped may not always be exactly no brainer, get that crap out of here type of stuff.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So this is a reminder. One of the shows that we're watching is called Yasuke, is not airing yet. It actually starts airing next Thursday. But we're just putting this slide here to remind everyone that we didn't forget about the show. We're just not going to be talking about till 2 weeks from now. So next week will be the last reminder that we're not doing the show until
Yeah.
then. So yeah.
Alrighty.
All right.
Is
So we are going to be talking about the top 9. We wanted actually to make it the top 8, but we did have a tie towards the bottom end. We're still doing the bottom 10, where
mhm.
we choose the 4 shows that will be eliminated. And since we're starting next week with 2 shows dropping, then that bottom 10 becomes the bottom 8. But we kind of wanted more
Yeah.
flexibility for now. I don't think there's any other changes, so we can
Nope.
go ahead and get started.
Alrighty. Um, the first, what ends up with the highest rolling average score is those white Snow White notes. This ended up being scored a 6 by Minatsu and an 8 by yours truly. This one ended up being tied for the top ranking for this week's episodes, specifically for me. And yeah. Those Snow White notes, I thought that this week, it was of, I was relieved because there was a tiny part of me that was wondering if the quality would drop off like a lot after their first episode. Essentially, like like
Hmm.
really intriguing setup, like oh, like super cool emotional moment, and then it kind of just falls off a cliff. Was like what I was afraid of. I'd say that I I'll admit that this episode was not quite as impactful as last week's, but I do think
I
that
agree.
the way that they did essentially, I felt like what this show still did well enough to me for me to like personally give it like a high personal score on it was the fact that they did simple like rather like simple straightforward storytelling of essentially the core subject, in this case being music, and relating it back to like character development, right? So like when you had the scene of him and his brother together playing that, and that whole kind of like emotional sequence, like that's an example for me where it's like, oh, like you have a subject matter for the anime and you're using it to kind of like dive into like just the characters and all that, and I think that they still did that pretty well. So
Hmm.
I was like decently satisfied by it. I think that it was definitely like a lot slower than the last episode, relatively speaking. Emotional stakes weren't that crazily higher, that type of stuff. But I do think that they did enough with the time to kind of like dive into like some aspects of like, oh, like whether it's introducing characters that we didn't really know the previous times, or kind of expanding on, oh, like here's like like a character that we saw last week, like the main character, and kind of telling us a little bit more about him.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that the emotional impact wasn't as strong.
Yeah.
Let me take a look here at my notes. Um, yeah, I also think the artwork wasn't as strong either.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's fair. That's
yeah,
fair.
so I'm looking at what I gave it last week. I gave the high score last week at
Mm-hmm.
7.5 and then
Mm-hmm.
knocked a point and a half because it lost the emotional appeal. And I think I enjoyed it a little bit less.
Okay.
I think the first episode was very strong, but I think it was really
Yeah.
hard to. I mean, I think both of us knew that the second episode wasn't going to be as strong.
Yeah, for sure. I'll admit, I know for my ratings that most of the lion's share of the points ended up coming from essentially like the personal score meter of it, because I did like
Yeah, yeah.
admit that's like, oh yeah, just like from the other aspects wasn't quite as strong as the previous week, but it still did like a
I
pretty
mean, it's
decent
still number
job.
one.
Yeah,
So, oh
yeah.
yeah. So the way we're ranking this is we're taking the rolling average, which is the average of all our scores in all past weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is a tie, then we grab the score that is highest during the most recent week, which in
Yeah,
this case is week two. And we still had
yeah,
ties, which makes sense.
yeah,
So it'll be interesting to see if those Snow White notes holds on. I
yeah.
think it won't
Yeah, I
personally
personally don't think it will either, and that is
because
because
of yeah
of
number
Vivi,
two.
Flora Eye's song. I will say that if you had to ask me to differentiate between like who's like the true number one, this would have taken the true number one spot. This one also did end up getting the highest score from Minatsu this week, rolling it at a 7, and on my score on an 8, which brings the rolling average to 7.5. I will say, yeah, if I had to give first place this week, just purely off of like this week's performance, this would be the one. I think that the episode honestly surprised me incredibly because, especially for some of those really, I guess, the strong start phenomena that we were talking about for those Snow White notes, I kind of expected that to be similar here, but like they just took like a pretty decent concept and then like added so much more intrigue, and I think a very, very emotional yet like nuanced like look at kind of like, oh, like here's the core struggle that the characters have to go through, and kind of like how like it sets it up extremely well, I think, just through the context of the actions and the dialogue. Like you get a much more detailed and vibrant look into, let's say for example, oh, the MC's motivations and like the way she thinks about this mission and her personal mission, or let's say like like some of the people that will end up kind of being the antagonists on like the storyline, like just kind of getting to see some of the way that they look at the world. Like I think that this episode did an incredibly good job of that, and it was incredibly exciting. And yeah, I thought the action sequences were done pretty well. There's just a lot of stuff going on. Like this is yeah, this one earns the number one score for this week for very good reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was well animated. And I think what a lot of these shows are missing, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
something that they're lacking that could
Yeah.
give them a bigger score, is the use of conflict.
Yeah.
because one, it's pretty exciting to see where the derision occurs and like how it can intensify the plot,
Yeah.
um, and the characters in general. And I think Vivi does a great job in showing that because of the conflict between her and her mission, her and the
Yeah.
teddy bear's
Yeah.
mission, her and the
Hmm.
teddy bear. And I mean, to put on top of that, right, the ending showed a humongous
Yeah.
point
Yeah.
of conflict.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think, oh, with that with that kind of ending, I think episode three, I think Vivi will overtake those Snow White notes.
Yeah. I that's also my prediction too. But yeah, incredible treat. I think that, whether you're looking for something that's just, like pleasant to the eyes to watch, all the way to, something that'll really get you to think. Like this show, definitely, definitely, performed and then some. Like, just I didn't expect it to continue to be this strong, but yeah, it definitely did. Yeah. Honestly, if you're not watching this, you're missing out. So, I would heavily recommend to put your time into it.
Yeah, and at number three, there's no changes so far. It's going to be 86 by A1 Pictures. I scored it a 6. John scored it a 7 with a rolling average of 6.63. For this one, I think this one actually implements CG this time around, and
Yes.
I thought the CG was actually not too bad. I think this is
Yeah,
what
I
CG
think it
should
was.
look
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, it's like
right?
it's like acceptable. Like there aren't like really big frame rate like contrast
Yeah,
between
that's
what's
a big
hand drawn and
issue.
what's like the
The
thing.
frame rate
Yeah,
drops.
I think it did a pretty good job of that. Visually, like you said, essentially, like it's still quite, nice to look at. And like it's definitely there. I think that the only if I were to the only thing that I could potentially kind of like ding the
Yeah, I
episode
have a ding
slash
as
like
well.
the yeah
What would
slash
it
the
be?
series is that I think that essentially the central conflict of like, oh, like, human lives are human lives, like it's just so
Yeah,
like tried and run, where it's just kind of like,
yeah.
okay, all right, like
Okay,
it's
I wasn't gonna
yeah,
say that, but I do
okay,
agree with that.
okay. Well, what was your ding?
Oh, my ding was like I think this episode didn't have much character development.
Yeah. Oh no, that's also like a thing too, is that like we saw a lot of meat of kind of like, oh, like, like as an operator, like this is like, kind of like my blah blah or whatever, and this time we had like, I think the maximum amount of character development exposure we saw was like a tiny bit of the guys chilling around a campfire, and like little moments happen, but it's like almost like a throwaway moment, and it's just
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
not that
That's
much. Yeah.
the show sets it up that there's gonna be some sort of conflict between
Yeah.
main character and what's his name? I forget his name.
Yeah.
Undertaker.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
But there's no conflict so far. No butting in.
Yeah, yeah, and exactly. It's just very. I would say that it still ends up number three because it's so far been pretty well executed. I will say that it's, in my personal opinion, it comes nowhere close to the first two, just simply because, once again, like this is just like it's very prototypical, like, like dystopian YA future type of stuff. Not to say that it won't, but it,
Yeah.
it won't go further. But at least just from what we've seen this episode, like, it's just like it's pretty much as prototypical as it gets. Like nothing particularly stands out in terms of just like the storytelling elements. That being said, once again, like visually, quite a treat. They did use some CG, but like I felt like the CG was done pretty well. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, it's still number three on our list, and I'm definitely looking forward to, how the story continues to unfold.
Yeah, same.
And so far, I would say that, it hasn't. I would not label this as severely underperforming on the hype that it had coming in. Like it's still like,
Yeah.
pretty
I
decent.
mean, it's the one of
Yeah,
the better
yeah,
shows, and the top three so far have been the most solid.
yes, for sure.
But oh well, I thought we were gonna have a new number four, but I forget that last week we had such a long list of number four shows that we still have no changes in the rankings. But number four, we have Odd Taxi by OLM and PICS. I gave it a 6.5. You gave it a 7, with a rolling average now of 6.25. And so our scores are a bit higher than the rolling average, which means
Yeah,
that we gave it a substantially better score this time around.
Yes. I'd say that I this is a comment that I actually I shared with Manatsu just earlier in the week when we were kind of doing our homework and doing our watching. But like, is the dialogue in this show is just such a treat. It's one of the things where like yeah, like it's so like it's refreshing. Like I feel like it's even though like just for full disclosure, I'm not somebody that speaks conversational Japanese or anything like that. And like I have to read subtitles, right, to be able to follow a dialogue. And even while reading the subtitles of a dialogue, like once again, like, I just felt like the dialogue between the characters, like it's just it feels very alive. And
Hmm.
it was just like I was like, damn, this is just like truly amazing. Like some of the positives that we saw in Odd Taxi last week, we were kind of like imagining that it's like, oh, it'll at best, continue or kind of like drop off a little bit. I'd say that it almost like took that and just like continued to run with it. And they've done like an incredibly good job of just, once again, like painting characters. Like I think like this is like such a good study on like essentially how to do characters. And yeah, I mean, like, it's plenty of stuff going on, plenty of intrigue, plenty of depth to the characters. Yeah, I'd say this was definitely a huge treat and one of my personal favorites as well.
Yeah.
Indicated by the
The
fact that it ended up being number four.
Yeah, the conversation is super. So it's super dense and super blunt. People
Yes.
talk very
Hmm.
directly,
Yeah.
which is very atypical of
Yeah.
most of the shows that we're
Yeah.
watching.
Hmm.
I think the intrigue too is just there's so many things going on, right? This
Yeah.
episode we were introduced to the singers group and what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Um, we finally got the first touching of the different plot points, which is the main
Yes.
character just being a taxi driver and
Hmm.
the I don't know what his name is, but like the gang leader
Yeah.
essentially.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, and so I'm excited to see how they deal with that next week and how the other things might factor into the show. Because I mean, one of the big things that they only slightly talked about
Hmm.
was that the main character was housing a runaway in his house.
Yes. Hmm.
Literally talk about it for like showed it for 10 seconds and
Yeah.
nothing about it
Yeah,
this episode.
nothing about it just like it just goes away. And so there's like plenty of intrigue. I think that, I guess that the genre kind of being, like a mystery, like detective-esque like type of vibe, I guess is not too surprising that there's a lot of mystery points being built up. But yeah, once again, like I said, like, when it comes to just like a show that's getting carried by dialogue, like this one is definitely there. Incredibly well done.
Yeah. So this is finally our first change of
Yep.
rankings. At number 5, we have Mars Red, who jumped up 6 spots. I gave it a score of 5.5. You gave it a score of 8, which is your highest score, for a rolling
Yes.
average of 6.13.
Yeah. I'd say that for those of you who may or may not remember the comments that I made about the show last week, I felt like the show definitely had an element of melodramaticness to it, and I wasn't quite sure exactly how they were going to execute on that. My personal take on that was that even though it is still continuing to be quite melodramatic, I think that they managed to pull it off to the point where at least it was enjoyable, even if it wasn't like full blown like oh like I guess like even if it wasn't 100% like buy-in of just like instantly like oh I just like identify 100% with the characters and that type of stuff. I did think that they managed to take that melodramatic edge that we talked about, and I think they executed on it well enough to at least be able for you to kind of watch this almost as, let's say, like I don't know, my attitude towards watching like a K-drama being like okay like well it's still like like damn like that's crazy, but okay that's still there's an element of beauty to that.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, so my score is a little bit lower
Yeah.
this time around. I think we have a big gap of 2.5. I think the thing
Yeah.
that I was missing, because I think the action sequences for this episode was really good
Yeah.
and very enjoyable. I think I was missing maybe more conflict because
Yeah.
the characters were pretty resolute in terms of their ideals in this episode. There wasn't
Hmm.
really much shifting. Maybe we kind of explored a little bit about vampires and what the vampire life is like,
Yeah.
and the introduction of the vampire
The vampire
unit.
unit, or so, yeah, so to
Yeah.
speak. Yeah.
But other than that, I didn't feel much things were going on. But
Yeah.
still a solid episode at the end of the day.
Yeah, like the really in terms of, shall we say, like like perspective shifting slash like conflict, that type of stuff, like the biggest snippet that we got ended up being, okay, I don't know my military ranks perfectly. Was the subordinate is a colonel, and then the one above is a major. Anyways, the subordinates
Yeah.
originally had some like tension points with the captain, and at the end, like essentially the big sacrifice, and he like now kind of respects him and stuff like that. That's the only tiny snippet of, shall we say, like really like, oh, like big conflict. Okay, technically, if you're gonna talk about like this combat conflict, yeah, there's a conflict that kind of closes out, but it's just very straightforward of, okay, we're a vampire extermination slash integration unit, and
Yeah.
there is a and it just plays out almost just exactly as it should, and so that part isn't that much, I guess, flavorful of, shall we say, like what Manasseh's talking about, like a conflict slash kind of like that type of point. And so we only got to see like a tiny snippet of that this episode.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, did you find it confusing his decision at the end?
I think, okay, that's what to me ended up making bumping it for me from shall I say, kind of a little bit slightly more middle of the pack rating to like a high rating. That it's because I think that the decision adds a pretty decent amount of, I guess, like nuance to it. I think that essentially
Explain to
the
the viewers
decision,
what happened.
so essentially, one of his unit members gets nicked by a vampire. And now, because he gets nicked by the vampire, is going to get, into the process of vampirification, which is kind of like the central story conflict of what this unit's supposed to be dealing with anyways. And
Yeah.
so essentially, keep in mind that out of this poster, so I don't think the scientist is, but the scientists in the major are not, but
No,
then everyone.
scientist is definitely a vampire because his
Oh,
eyes are
he's.
red.
Oh, okay, okay. Sorry. So scientist is. The major is not, but the other people there are vampires. At least like the unit that he's operating are some vampires that are running. And the person that gets nicked originally wasn't a vampire, and he began the process of transforming into a vampire. And eventually, the scientist has this kind of morbid curiosity of like, oh my gosh, we're finally gonna get data sample. Let's see what happens. And then the captain essentially just comes over and just says, "I got this." Like, you don't need to do this anymore. And he steps and essentially just kills him. So
Yeah.
instead of adding another member to his unit, he chooses to just kill him and just end it all. And I think
Yeah.
that,
Note that the I think they say it, but the vampiric process only works 10% of the time.
yes, so this would be an incredibly, like, the scientist dude is incredibly excited because he's like, oh yes, like, like shit's gonna go down, like, I'm gonna be able to get a data point, get a new member, blah blah. And the captain decides to just end it. I think that personally shows kind of, I thought that added a lot of nuance where, okay, the captain, technically, right? If you're a captain that's doing this type of stuff, you would think that somebody in this position would have the stance of like, okay, like suffering slash utilizing evil and suffering for the greater good is a worthy cause, right? Because that's kind of what they're doing to a certain extent. That being said, though, if you recall to the last episode where he essentially gets the orders to begin to work on this unit, there is like a level of not sure, like unsure conflictness that comes on his part where he's like, okay, in the end, like, it's respectful, like, yes, officer, I'm gonna respect your orders, but it is, at least for me, I kind of saw him as being a little bit kind of like, I'm accepting orders only because I'm supposed to accept orders, was kind of like the vibe that he had at the end of the episode. I think that what happened with essentially, him making that decision and slash like the twist shows that, this is a guy who at the end of the day, he's still dealing with this idea of being like a cog in like the grand wheel. And so for me, seeing that kind of like decision part was like, oh yeah, like, okay, now we get like a little bit more, a better picture of kind of like, number one, potentially like the themes that the story is going to dive into, but also just in general, like what type of a person the captain is. And so I actually really incredibly liked that moment, and I think that moment was what stood out to me and made it kind of like, okay, this is like pretty decent storytelling, even if it ends up being kind of over the top, which I do
Yeah.
admit it is.
I'm predicting. I forget if this is gonna end in just one season, but
Okay.
uh, I predict that he becomes a vampire at the end,
Yeah.
and he stays true to
Yeah.
himself, and he kills himself.
Yeah. That's kind of like that. That's like a pretty decent prediction of like kind of where the story is gonna go. I mean, and once again, you have this guy where even in the first episode, like being just like ridiculously melodramatic, like he comes back, right? He visits a site that they're standing on in the poster, drops some flowers
Yeah.
because he's like has feelings, and so it's clearly like this man where he's like entrenched between the idea of doing his duty and essentially his personal perspectives on like vampiricism in general, right? You have a guy who's carrying out his job, but clearly, is not buying into this whole idea of,
Yeah.
vampiricism should just be like, accepted as is type of thing. Like, and so, yeah, I will say that, if you had to have me differentiate between my different eights, this one probably would be the lowest eight. But, like I said, like, I won't I won't lie and say that this is something that you'll be able to 100% just kind of like emotionally immerse yourself into, but I do think that for a show that is quite melodramatic as we figured out last week and
Yeah.
continues to go down the melodramatic path this week, it seems to do enough good of a job, at least in my opinion, to kind of make it enjoyable.
Sure.
Alrighty.
All right. Next is Corey Kimo at number 6. Dropped. Oh, we should actually say 2 because I'm pretty sure it was number 4 since we had a ton of
Okay.
number 4.
Yeah.
I gave it a 6. You gave it a 7 for an average of 6.13. I think the show still continues to surprise me because it's
Yeah.
very enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
The interactions and such. I'll go over to my notes here. The animations is very solid for this
Yeah.
show. Main character development went up. Still very enjoyable to watch, and I think I'm not sure. I mean, you can kind of see now that there is hints of romance. At least,
Yeah.
there was always a hint of romance between the older guy
Yeah.
character and the female, but not the other way around. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, I will say that for me personally, it's one of the things where, okay, let me put it like this: to say almost the exact opposite of Mars Red, where I go, I can't really like buy into the realism, and it's just a little bit melodramatic
Mm-hmm.
over the top, but I can still enjoy it. This one was kind of almost the exact opposite, namely being the end scene of this episode, where essentially, like you see that finally there's a level of reciprocation, right? And it's one of those moments for me where I'm watching, just like, dude, god damn it, like, come on, like, you're better than this, but like, I know it's very realistic. Like, it's genuinely, it's like, okay, like, the dude is still good looking, and sure, like, she may on principle like dislike some of the ways he conducts himself, but like, sometimes, like, it's chemistry is physical as well too, right? And like you saw, like, in my opinion, that last moment, even though it was frustrating, it was like a very, like, it's like a very real thing. And so it's just like, like, I was just like, it definitely doesn't snap me out of like buy-in. It, in fact, I would say that, like, oh, seeing something like that, it's like, oh yeah, like, this is something that like genuinely actually happens. And so it's still pretty enjoyable, even though just full disclaimer, like what I said at the beginning of, the preseason, where I'm just like, this premise kind of gives me a little bit of heebie-jeebies. Like, I kind of don't like it, and like I still have that feeling, but yeah, I mean, even despite that, like, I will admit that even despite that kind of like, that weird feeling that I have when I'm watching the show, and kind of like a little bit of just like for the premise, like, it's done pretty well, like it's executed pretty well. Like, that's like, like that moment at the end, it's like, yeah, like, shit, like, sure, like, maybe as a third person, just purely watching from a objective lens, you're just like, god damn it, girl, don't do that. But it's like, that's just how it sometimes is, and that's genuinely like, yeah, like, I think that was a very human moment, and it's done pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing was really just her blushing, and
And saying,
I think, yeah, and I think a lot of people will be like, oh, the moment that happens, like, this doesn't make sense. But it's like,
yeah,
no, but they're trying to explore that kind of topic, and
yeah,
they're doing it in a way that I don't think is like hurl worthy as of right now.
yeah. Okay.
Uh, but we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how the interactions develop.
Yeah, it's like, she's like, she gets held by him, and it's like she's on his chest, and afterwards, when she blushes on her own, she goes like, oh, like, he smelled of cologne. It's like, now, like, there's like a physical association with like who he is as a person, right? And it's just like that moment where it's just like, yeah, shit, it's like, it's real. Like, and I feel like, like, it's like, obviously, like, you can be sanctimonious and go like, you're better than this, but like, I do think that it was done pretty well. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree. At number 7 is Shadow's House. Went down 3. I gave a score of 5.5. You gave a score of 7 with a rolling average of 6.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I think Shadow's House. Okay. I will admit that this pace, that the slow pace that happened in episode 1, is getting really dragged, continually to get dragged out. Like
Yeah,
into
yeah,
episode 2, it's just like, dude, like holy crap, like this is incredibly slow. I do think that is going to be my biggest frustration point with this is like I feel like there's a lot of stuff you can explore, and the fact that
yeah,
the pace is going so slow to me is it's like a little bit aggravating where it's like geez, like you really like just took it slowly.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they picked it up a lot towards the end when they
Okay,
finally
yeah, yeah,
interacted
yeah.
with another
Yeah.
Shadow and her
Yeah.
doll.
Yeah.
And it was a doll that she already encountered before, right? She met her
Yes.
earlier, and so to see, and us as viewers to see what she kind of did, because all she does
Yes.
like imitate and
Yeah.
also just be
Mirror,
a
yeah.
second of her, right?
Yeah, it's like
That was the one that hooked me in. I think without
yeah.
that scene, the score would
Yes.
have been much lower.
Yeah, exactly. Like to me it's like oh like the pacing all the way up until before that moment where you kind of like truly see like oh like you know like a doll is supposed to be like a conduit slash mirror like a true conduit slash mirror like we have the character talking about like oh that's what you're supposed to be like and like a sense of purpose type of just narrative perspective, but we see it not actually being put into action of like oh like you're supposed to be a conduit slash mirror up all the way up until that point, which is very near the episode. I was just kind of like come on, there's like so much stuff you can explore, let's pick up the pace a little bit. I will say that interaction that we see kind of redeemed it and was able to keep the score like decent. I think that going forward it'll be a lot of um pacing watch will be kind of like on my watch list. I just think that this is a premise that has so much points of exploration, and so if you screw up the pacing, like I feel like you're putting a lot of potential down the drain. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean it's not number 7, so if it
Yeah,
does do bad next week, I think it should still stay afloat. But I think two
yeah,
weeks is like their
yeah,
deadline until they
yeah,
hit the bottom.
yeah,
All right, at number 8, we have Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro from Telecom Animation Film. I gave it a 5.5. You gave it a 6. Rolling average of 5.75. This is one of the ties since
yeah. Okay.
top 9.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say with this episode, it was the best way to kind of describe it was that it didn't do anything that wowed me, but it also like didn't like take the original premise slash kind of like I guess like the perks or the good parts of what they was able to bring in episode 1 and really screw that up a lot. Like it was pretty much just like business as usual. There is a tiny moment towards the end where you finally see her getting flustered, and that to me was a huge kind of like okay like this wasn't just like stupid old like recursive crap like that to me was nice to finally see it. Obviously it comes off kind of like a etchy moment, and so there's like you know I'll just kind of like a tiny bit of points off that, but we do at least finally see like kind of like a little bit more of a dimension to who she is. This is one of those shows where you know it still ends up on our top list. I will say that you know it kind of depends on where they go with it. But yeah, I mean overall it's just like it was decent is kind of like the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, nothing too much happening. Well
Yeah.
animated, well voice acted. I think
Yeah.
whoever's doing Nagatoro is
Yeah.
doing an amazing job. I like this episode a little bit more than its
Yeah.
previous episode, even though I gave it the same score.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. Yeah, I think the same issue with last week, where we have no idea how fast it'll take for them to have
Yeah.
romantic development.
Yeah.
But no, I don't have to see romantic development if there's development elsewhere from the main
Yes.
character.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be where I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And the last show on the top 9 is Farewell, My Dear Kramer at number 8 as well. Same scores across the board as last week, and so the rolling average is the same at 5.75.
Yeah. I would say this one I had a lot of hopes for it last week, and I'm not saying that the hopes are instantly vanquished, but I do think that this episode in particular gave me like an idea of like, oh, it like turned from intensity to like comfiness, and like it wasn't like necessarily all the way bad, but like it definitely kind of like hit a switch, and the intensity or slash like the emotional stakes that we saw didn't feel like it was nearly as powerful. And obviously, like we have to do build up, and so I'm not gonna, it still ended up on our top list, and I'm not gonna like
Yeah.
severely ding it. But yeah, it definitely felt like it kind of like we saw a lot of like happenings, and then it's slowed down, like it's dropped down a little bit, and so it'll be curious to see kind of
Yeah.
where it goes.
Yeah, and I think I agree. I think a part of that is definitely because the exhibition match they played is just an exhibition match,
Yeah.
right? There's no
Hmm.
stakes at all. They're just
Yeah.
learning. The coach wants the team to learn how crap they are,
Yeah. Hmm.
and so it's just a lot more character origins, really.
Hmm.
And so not the most exciting. It's not
Hmm.
like boring per se,
Yeah, like
but yeah,
it definitely felt like kind of almost like a little bit on the comfy side where it's like, oh, you have the scene of them going, to the coach's family's restaurant and they're eating stuff together. It's just like little
yeah,
comfy moments where it's like, oh, like look at how much of a klutz she is, and so it's like it's not like it's completely devoid of substance. It just like wasn't
yeah,
nearly at the level that it was last episode.
exactly. So
Yeah.
like I think a lot of the shows will say this, but we'll see next week if they can kind
Yeah.
of simplify stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty.
All right, so we're at the middle 12. I think for just so that we can speed
Yeah.
it up, we can just take turns with
Okay.
each show. So do you want to
Yeah.
go first or me?
All right, I can go first. Alrighty, Super Cub. This one got bumped up one place. Panats gave it a 5.5. I gave it a 6, bringing the rolling average to 5.63. I'd say that this one just continuously, just does comfy pretty decently, and yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, just yeah,
All right, at number 11 is Burning Kabaddi. It went up by 5 spots. I gave it a 5.5. John gave it a 6 for a rolling average of 5.5. I think it's more of the same, where it's just great animation. We learn a little bit more of
yeah,
the sport every
yeah,
single episode. So we learn more about this, and I think it's partly the mystique of the sport draws me in.
yeah,
And soon, what I'm gonna predict is it then becomes the intensity of the competition that will draw me
yeah,
in. But
yeah.
solid.
Full Dive, the ultimate next gen full dive RPG, is even shittier than real life. Is now at number 12. It dropped 8 spots. Manats gave it a score of 5.5. It gave it a score of 5. The rolling average is 5.5. I'd say that this is a show where it doesn't. It's still well within the bounds of kind of the expectations that were set up in the first episode, but it's not nearly as thrilling. And I guess the best thing to say, almost like a trademark catchphrase at this point is we'll see what happens next week and see where it goes.
I do want to
Yeah.
butt in
Okay.
because I
Yeah.
realized the main character, his name is Hero, obviously because he's a hero of this game.
Yeah.
But he's actually, I'm pretty sure he's modeled after the main character from Darling in the Franxx,
Oh, really?
because he looks
Okay.
exactly, almost exactly like the guy in Darling in the Franxx's name is also Hero. So I think it's more
Oh.
of like it's one of the funnier, because this show was
Okay.
also made, or the manga was made after Darling in the
Yeah.
Franxx. So
Okay. All right. So
I found
there's
that
some
funny.
there's a commentary spin to it. Okay. All right. I'll keep that in mind.
Number 13, it's The Way of the House Husband. Dropped down 2 spots. I gave it a 5.5. John gave it a 5 for a rolling average of 5.38. Where's my notes for this? The Way of the House Husband. I think it's still a funny show. Not too much character development. It's mostly comedy at this point. It is
Yeah.
tough because the show's only like 15 minutes each, and there's only 3 more episodes left. So as of
Yeah.
right now, it's still pretty solid. I don't see it going up any higher unless
Yeah.
there's some sort of development. But solid score, mid of the pack for a funny show.
Yeah. Exactly. Tokyo Revengers. This one went up 5 spots to number 14. Manatsu gave it a score of 6. I gave it a score of 5. The rolling average is 5.25. There is a lot more exploration this time into kind of emotional development slash. Not only is it emotional development, it's kind of like since the whole premise is you're going back in time with your current memory, there's a lot
Yeah.
of kind of like as an adult looking at where you were at as a kid. And so I do think that they managed to step up the emotional exploration pretty damn well, which is why it jumped up like a couple of spots. So yeah, continue to see where it goes.
Number 15, Godzilla Singular Point, went down 4 spots and is now currently number 15. We both gave it a 5 this time around with a rolling average of 5.25, which means they kind of scored lower this time around.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of points here. This is one of my more longer
Okay.
note section.
All right.
First, there's just a lot of questionable scenes in this episode.
Mhm.
the monster dies in the first 15 minutes, and then someone first instinct is to touch the creature. They're like
Yeah.
touching it, like, wait, it's so hot. I'm like, why are you touching a
Yeah.
corpse? Then we have one of the female main characters, letting an AI submit
Yeah.
a research thesis paper,
Yeah.
which makes no sense.
Yeah.
And then the last point I put here, and this could be me just nitpicking, looking.
Okay.
I think it might be predictable, but in the microfiche or whatever they call it,
Yeah.
the little film,
Yes.
the scientist that was on it, there was imagery of jellyfish around, and I
Okay.
know jellyfish is typically related to, I think, immortality, was it,
Okay.
or good health because
Yeah.
of the way they reproduce and live
Yes.
forever. So my prediction is this whole research is something to do with immortality.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Saint's power, magic power is omnipotent. I will say this one, Manatsu gave a score of 4.5. I gave a score of 5. Now the rolling average is 5.25. This one definitely went from the slant of isekai to a romance flick. And okay,
It's like
it went.
what's that game? It's like not Harvest Moon. What am I thinking of?
What I'm not sure.
You go on.
Okay, yeah. But anyways, like it, it definitely kind of it was a little bit surprising to me. I wouldn't say that it's all the way bad, but yeah, this is definitely a little bit more. It definitely took a little bit more on the romance emotional side. Was the focus for this episode. Yeah, I guess we'll see where it goes from here.
Jiran, The Princess of Blood is Snow by Bach and Record at number 17, so it's gone up 2 spots. I gave it a score of 5.5. John gave it a score of 5, so now it is a rolling average of 5.13, which means this is trajectory. It's going up. For this episode, solid progression all around.
Yeah.
At least from the beginning to middle part, it was more of the same.
Yeah.
A lot of development towards the back half
Yes.
of the episode. We kind of understand where Joran is coming from.
Yeah.
And then the whole character of the treasurer dying by her
Yes.
partner
Yeah.
was a big twist. And so very exciting to see what happens. It looks like we're gonna have a big character battle. But I think I like the fact that it was a very solid origin story, that we know her purpose now.
Yeah.
Also the origin story of her adopted daughter.
Yeah, her adopted daughter, and
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I will say that, you know, it had a vibe of, you know, essentially the historical drama genre that's, you know, it's so popular, whether it's in Chinese TV or Korean dramas, like, you know, this whole idea of like extremely like, you know, like hammed up, like, you know, emotional connections, like, you know, like her and the adoptee, like, you know, it's pretty prototypical. I will still say though that at least, you know, pacing wise, they've ramped it up a little bit towards the end, and I definitely have the best way for me to describe it is I am interested to see what happens next, and that's what's most important in my opinion. So it's like, yeah.
Definitely.
All right, this is Dynazone. Dynazenon. Okay, it's now at number 18. I went out to give a score of 5.5. I gave it a score of 4. I thought that it just like went down like the routes of essentially like it like almost gave me the vibes of like, oh, like the everything's pretty simplistic and dry cut, and the central feature is supposed to be literally Dynazon, like and it kind of gave me a little bit of vibes of like, oh, like this is like an anime to sell toys. I know that's not actually what it is, but like it kind of gave me a little bit of those vibes. I felt like it was a little bit frustrating for me, at least personally, but then again, this might just end up being a thing where the age demographic isn't exactly matching up for the show. Yeah. It's still pretty nothing particularly special, you know. It's your campy action sequences, you know, with Gundams and all that. Pretty straightforward. I guess we'll see what happens next week.
All right, Backflip at number 19 went 5 spots. I gave it a 6. You gave it a 5 for rolling average of 5. I think the animation for this one was a little bit meh, but I did enjoy the whole process of character development with the character team. I thought it was much more enjoyable than its week 1 episode.
Yeah.
Which is why I think maybe that's why it contributed to me bumping it up by 2 points.
Yeah.
I thought the first episode was real meh, and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty decent.
Yeah.
And so I gave it a 6.
All right. I've been killing slimes for 300 years and maxed on my level. This one managed to pull out from the shit list or the can list, so to speak. From
Yeah.
number 20 up now, went up 5 points. Manatsu gave a score of 5.5. I gave it a score of 5. The rolling average now is 4.75. I will say that the it's still very comfy, but there is at least some more elements of character development outside of hey, this is an isekai. I want to live a nice, peaceful lifestyle in an isekai world. Like it started to bring at least some stuff in there. So went from just, in my opinion, like an AI generatable thing to a little bit more substance, and that's what we got to see here. Hence the score bump. I guess we'll kind of see where it goes from here.
And the last show of the middle, and who that is also safe from elimination
Yeah.
this week, is Osamake. At number 20, it jumped 6 spots. This was also, I believe, was it
Yes.
also in our list
Yes.
of
It
drop
was.
list last
Yes.
week?
It was in the drop list.
Yeah, so I give it a 5.5. You give it a 5 for rolling average of 4.75, which meant it really skyrocketed this time around.
Yeah.
I think it was much more enjoyable this time around. I liked the character progression from the main female character.
Yes.
What's her name? Kudo.
I forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From Kudo. We know a backstory of the main character as well.
Yeah.
Learn more about him. So I think I needed that part because it was.
Yeah.
It felt more of just a cliched,
Yeah.
romance.
Incredibly cliche.
Yeah, and so I think this added a lot more depth to it. The only thing I put here is the kid photo was pretty obvious from the start that it was going to be the female main character.
Yeah.
Also, the first love motivation is kind of cliche as well. But other
Yeah.
than that, I thought it was a pretty solid show. It's good to point out too that both of the female protagonists are
Okay.
on whatever they're called.
Yeah.
So, black-haired girl's name is Kudo, which means black in Japanese, and then the white-haired girl's name, not white-haired, the blonde-haired
Yeah.
girl, her name is Shiro, which means white in,
Yeah.
in
Okay.
Japanese. So it's literally
Yeah.
just black and white. And
Yeah.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah. I will say that I guess the problems we have with kind of like the romantic setup of the story, like they still exist, but at least they did add enough substance now to the point where it isn't just essentially,
Exactly.
shall we say, like the flawed romantic setup only, and now there's a little bit of extra substance. So yeah, I mean, this one has officially lifted itself out from Gauntlet Elimination, the pack. Speaking of the pack, now we have the bottom 10. These are going to be the shows that are going to be eligible for getting cuts and not survive, falling to the gauntlets.
Yeah. So it's the bottom 10 from last week. We eliminated 4.
Yes.
2 escaped. So there will be 4 repeats.
Yes.
And the first one up is going to be Cestus, the Roman fighter. He actually stays at number 22. I gave it a 4.5. You gave it a 5. So it now has a rolling average of 4.75. What do you think of this show?
I'm just gonna be honest. Like the only spots that are good to me are surprisingly, aka not the things you would expect from a Bandai Namco, like fighting anime. The parts that seem to me that were able to shine were like aspects of this eventual, like they kind of do like a flash forward at the very beginning of the anime, and now you kind of like get to see the origin story of who this guy is. A little bit of that, we get to see the Mistress of Pompeii or whatever. That's kind of like what they call her, like the Mistress of Pompeii. That character we get to see. Like I still think the only parts of this show that shine are kind of the human elements, and the rest of it is just incredibly falling flat, which is once again like just baffling my mind. But that is kind of
you agree that the thing that they're lacking is the third name in the studio's name, right?
Yeah, like it's
their animation is
yeah,
so
it's
garbage.
just yeah, like it's just like, dude, like come on, bro, like this is supposed to be like I would have expected a fighting anime, right? It's like that's focused on action, like to really like nail down the visual part, and like boy are they falling like so flat on that. It's like incredible that like like once again the positives for this show come from something that you would almost just as a viewer right off. It's like when you watch a Jason Statham movie, you're not there to try to like look at like emotional development, that type of
Yeah.
stuff, and almost like subconsciously you've already written that stuff off, and that's like what you would expect coming into a title of this. But then they drop the ball in that aspect. But the characters, at least like there's still like some character development to make it like bearable. That being said, the animation, the lack of quality in animation has now caught up with it to the point where it is now on our bottom 10 in the
Yeah,
gauntlet
and a
consideration.
big part of
Yeah.
that is because back in the first episode, there was only CG for the fight sequences.
Yes.
Now there's CG for not fight sequences, which
Yeah.
makes it very off-putting. Because I
Yeah.
agree with you. I think the character development was pretty good. Like we got a
Yeah.
little bit of Nero and his
Yeah.
conflict with his mom and the
Yeah.
whole mom putting the
Yeah.
aspirations on their child.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, I'm really interested to see this like backstory.
Yeah.
But the fight sequences and anytime the CG is involved,
Yeah, it's just like, ugh, it's just such garbage. Like, and just, yeah, like, it's honestly a huge thorn in the side. Not what I expected. But,
no, I agree. But it's currently the top of the bottom.
yeah, so there's that.
Number 23 is Fairy Ranmaru. It went down 7 spots. I gave it a 4.5. John gave it a 4 for a rolling average of 4.75. I knew this show. I knew this is what gonna happen to this show
Yeah.
because there's 5 characters. They're going through each single character to have their own like moment, and then
Yeah.
go for the plot development.
Yeah.
I personally thought, just looking at the 2 stories from this week and
Yeah.
last week, this one wasn't as compelling, wasn't as nice
No.
as last week's.
No, absolutely not. Like, this is kind of like, okay, I won't say that an AI can come up with this premise, but if an AI took a look at the first episode, it could come up with this one. Like, it's just incredible.
Yeah,
Like, it's just like,
it didn't feel
Jesus.
believable.
Yeah. It's like, first of all, there's already a very non-believable element of it, aka like a ridiculous amount of fan service and this whole Maho Shoujo but for dudes type of thing. Like, like type of thing. And yeah, like, boy, it was just like, dude, like, I felt like I didn't need to watch to like know what would happen, and then like it just like fell squarely into my pessimistic expectations of like kind of like the events that were supposed to happen, and it's just like, dude, like for example, like that whole thing of like, oh, like people who are too passionate, it can be a big whoopsies. It's like, okay, dude, like really, like this is gonna, yeah, it's like, jeez, like come on, like this is really gonna be the hill that we're gonna like that we're gonna sit on now. It's like, come on, guys, like so.
I do have to say the animations are still pretty.
Yes,
solid.
the animations are pretty solid. Like visually speaking, the opposite of Sisters, where like visually speaking, it is still quite like like quite crisp and quite nice to watch. But it's just like from like a story element type of things, just like, oh my gosh, like really now, like
And my fear for it is because there's 5 characters.
yeah, we're gonna see three more,
three more of these, and
then potentially, like potentially something could happen. But even like the tiny little sprinkles of like, oh, like here's what could be like a thing. AK, for example, for this one, like, oh, hey, fire equals hot-headed equals super passionate. It's like, okay, like anything that comes out of that, like, is not gonna be incredibly nuanced. Like, okay, all right, like,
the only form of conflict that I saw was like they were like, oh, there's 2 of them that had a
conflict,
like the clans had a conflict.
Yeah, it's just like,
I'm not that interested.
like, dude, come on, guys, like, yeah.
Number 24 is To Your Eternity. It went up 2 spots. We both gave it a 5, which means we scored it higher than the previous week, and the rolling average is at 4.63. Pacing so much better with this episode. My goodness,
a lot better.
So it's interesting because I perused the r/anime subreddit.
Yeah.
This was like a lot of everyone's top episodes. The first episode, I was like, well, what? I thought the first episode was so slow and so boring.
Yeah.
I'll
Is it just like, okay,
what the other show was?
Wow. Okay.
See, one of the other top shows we haven't even talked about yet. So
okay.
So.
Oh God, are you serious, man?
Yeah.
Like, some of you weebs need to get better taste. But I will say for this one, like, it's almost okay. Let me put it like this: the things that made it such a snooze fest to me, aka like a failed Morgan Freeman epic narration attempt that was like basically the first episode, like. Not to say that it wasn't there in this episode, but essentially they took that stuff, chucked it to the wayside, and actually started doing storytelling. And that's, like, in my opinion, why this episode was better. It's almost like because it wasn't episode 1. Yes, the premise is still there, and like, you still have, like essentially like a weird being that morphs some physical parts,
Yeah.
and like you kind of explore a little bit of like how he's essentially like a feral thing or a jig or whatever. But it's like that's like at least there's like actual substance now going on and there's some level of storytelling. And once again, I cannot stress enough, this episode got a bump in the rating because it wasn't the first episode, and I'm very surprised to hear you of people like thinking positively about the first episode. Just yeah.
I mean, so
Okay.
it's a little hard for me because I've read the manga.
Okay.
So I part of it's really hard to separate my bias
Yeah,
because
okay.
I've read the manga.
Okay.
But imagine if that whole first episode was crunched down into maybe half of an episode.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't
then
be as bad. Yeah.
Pacing wise, that's what's supposed to happen. But the
Yeah.
whole let's just cram let's grab one chapter of a
Yeah,
of
and
a
just like
manga, put it into
elongate
one
it out
episode.
crazy with narration. Yeah, it's just
Yeah. So I mean, and I think they did a better job at pacing.
Yeah.
The whole surprise reveal of that March is being sacrificed.
yeah.
They didn't put it at the end of an episode, which they could have
Yeah.
very well
Yeah.
put that at the end of the episode to make it a cliffhanger, but they put it in the middle of the episode. Good, well done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just speed
Yeah.
it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, at number 25, Pretty Boy Detective Club went down by 1. I gave it a 5.5. You gave it a 4 for an average of 4.63. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I will say that I can kind of see what the show is going for. In my opinion, if you're gonna go for like a very almost like jump around dialogue heavy type of stuff, like you better be giving me more substance. And my personal gripe with this is just that like, okay, like for the style of what it was trying to go for, there's just like jack shit going on in the story, and it felt like really just like trivial, which was kind of my thing.
Yeah, I put that incorrectly. That's actually not a 5.5 by me. It's a 4.5 by me.
Okay, all right. So the scores are a little bit closer then. Okay, yeah. Like but yeah, it's one of the things where once again, like I understand what it's going for. It's kind of like the Monogatari series a little bit. Like there's
Yes,
like
exactly.
I said, like yeah, it's that's what it's going for. But I do think it's like okay, like for example, like I haven't even finished the Monogatari series, and I don't even remember how many episodes I've watched. But what I can tell you is that there's a lot more philosophical substance going on in those shows, and that's why that format / style, in my opinion, works. There is literally like by self-proclamation a boy's like a trivial child matter is anything that's going on, and it's just very very like incredibly like substanceless in my opinion, even though the animations and stuff are nice.
So I agree with
Okay.
you that because
Okay.
animation is great, right?
Yeah,
We agree
yeah,
with that.
yeah.
I agree with the comparison to Monogatari.
Mhm.
I do think it does share this quality of substance because let's say so in Monogatari what's really interesting is that they divide the story arcs by like stories, right?
Okay.
And so the first story is the crab story, which is
Yeah.
involving the main
Yeah.
character and what's her name? Senjogahara, I think is her name.
Yeah.
And that arc lasts 3 episodes.
Yeah.
And so if you only watch the first 2 episodes, I think you would feel the same way like how you feel for this Pretty Boy Detective Club. 'Cause
Okay.
right now they're only in episode 2 because they named it also by an arc. I forget
Yeah.
what the name of the arc is, but this
Okay.
is part 2, second episode.
Yeah.
So I agree that substance is kind of weak. Interesting ending or middle.
Yeah. Middle ground
thing
is
with the secret military satellite being
they're
destroyed.
literally
That
just
is
like
not
out
what
of
I
fucking left
didn't
field.
know.
It's like Jesus. Okay. All right.
It's
Like
not a star. It's actually
Yeah.
a secret satellite
Yeah.
that got destroyed. So I'm interested to see where it goes next week. I'm assuming that's when they close the arc, like 3 or 4 episodes.
Yeah.
But then also, like, what does that look like after, right?
Yeah.
After this arc is done, and the question does it justify us saving it? Or
Yeah. Yeah,
eliminating
I think for me personally, it's kind of one of the things where it's like, okay, so let's talk like the emotional or like kind of like what's the extra aspect to this conflict of, or this essentially thing of like, oh, she figures out it's not a star, and then kind of like there's not a lot of emotional exploration into, well, okay, now what? Instead, they're all talking about like, how are we gonna beat the adults at their game? Haha, we're boys. Like, and that's kind of like
Yeah.
the direction they took with it, which to me is disappointing. It's kind of like, okay, no, let's go back and talk about how this girl's like, you know, like her childhood innocence and all that type of stuff kind of got shattered. Like, let's focus a little bit more on that. But like they kind of just like swung a little bit out. Like to me, it's like, okay, like sure, like the the conflict or kind of like the plotline substance doesn't have to be a lot, but like I want you to focus on like what you can on it, and I felt like they didn't do that, and they just went, like I said, like this kind of like fucking crazy out of left field borderline QAnon shit of like, oh, like there's just like a
no clue.
yeah, it's just like, dude, like it's a military satellite that they had to destroy by a nuke, and it's some crazy ass shit. That's why you're getting chased, and it's like, okay, like sure, like fine, like toss something crazy in there, whatever. Like, but the whole point is that like if the show's substance is not supposed to be about the plot lines anyways, like please, like I said, like there's a whole aspect to it of like this girl's shit just got shattered. Like why not? Why are we not focusing on that instead? Like
I think
why not?
part of it is that she did it get shattered, right? Like the whole
okay,
idea,
I guess okay.
She did see something.
Okay, she does saw something. It wasn't a star, yeah. And I guess like for me personally, it's like I would have wanted to see a little bit more coming out of that, but then like I said, like I felt like they just like dived into this like almost borderline QAnon esque of like, oh, like here's the logistics of, you know, like what are we gonna do now and that type of stuff, and that kind of disappointed me a bit. So, yeah. Alrighty. The next one. Let's make a Mark 2. Nippon Animation. Manasa gave it a score of 4. I gave it a score of 5. That was a rolling average of 4.63. I will say this is almost kind of like a very convenient way to critique the show. I found out that there was listings of a live action version of this in the episode list.
No, so it's not a live
okay, what is it? Okay, what is it?
It's just so it's the 4 characters of voice actresses.
Okay.
And they just do like stuff pertaining to ceramics.
Okay. All right. So, so now with a little bit more of that clarification, I will still say the feeling that I kind of had was like you had a pretty comfy, somewhat interesting circumstance. I personally think less interesting than Super Call, but hey, like there's a comfy thing that you introduced, and then like it just went like so fucking slow. Like it just like it was just kind of like oh man, like you guys really don't have much to work with, right? It's like okay, like in my opinion, like if you're gonna have this little to work with, like you better make that shit like so cutesy, like that one show where like the writer adopts a cat or whatever. Like okay, you better just like ham fist up to the max is just like nothing but like super cute shit. Like if you're gonna have that little substance going on. And I felt like it's just like, oh, like there was very little substance going on this time around. And it didn't, like I said, like, you know, if you're going to just make like a comfy thing that you're supposed to watch just for the sake of comfiness, I expect you to like ham up the comfiness like a crazy amount. And I felt like it wasn't there this time around.
Yeah, I think the animation this time around was pretty subpar. There's a lot of still shots.
Yeah.
And what made it nice last week was animation. I thought it was really well done, highlighting the pieces of pottery, but this time it was kind of lackluster. I agree.
Yeah.
I think the substance was missing here.
Yeah.
And I want to go back because Super Cup was in the middle, we didn't talk about it too much. That was great. She finally made a friend that also loved motorcycles or motorbikes, and you could see the progression of character development with the main character. Whereas for this show, not much. And I think a part of it is because of the way it's set up. So this show is like 15 to 18 minutes, and then the rest is the live action. It feels like more of like a family show where you show kids and stuff like that. Which is why there's not much character development. It's just more like, oh, here's some interesting facts, but kind of boring, I think. As
exactly.
Number 27 is Shaman King 2021. It dropped down 11 scores. I gave it a 3.5, and as you note, it is not the lowest score. It's not highlighted red, which means it's not my lowest score, and it is 4 for you, so it's not your lowest score either, I don't think.
Yeah, it is not.
So rolling average of 4.5. As you can see, our scores this week is lower than the rolling average, so our scores went way down.
I will say that my optimism for this show was misplaced last episode. I will fully admit that now. I was like, oh, there could be some good stuff, and boy, did they just flush it down the fucking toilet. I was very
pessimistic at first.
Yeah,
when you were talking about your optimism. Like, okay, I could see that.
Yeah, exactly. They just let me down like so hard. Like, man, they just like flushed it down the goddamn toilet. Like,
what did you dislike about it?
Okay, dude, you cannot. Okay, like, let me tell you how prototypically, like, just snooze fest of it is like, I'm going to submit the thing to my will versus I need to be Nakama with it. It's like, dude, like, please, like, just, jeez, like, stop, man. Like, it's just so dumb. Like, there's just like, it's so telegraphed. There's just absolutely no emotional stakes that happen at all. And like, I was just so disappointed where like, oh, like, you have this whole thing of like, oh, like, there's another spirit. And to me, it's like, oh, the difference between this and other shonens is that, oh, now there's another aspect is maybe there's going to be internal conflict or something like that. No. Literally, this episode, they went like, we have the power of friendship, let's fucking go, baby. And I was just like, dude, like that's like the only edge that you could have had for this setup of like, like having an extra spirit. And another thing just got like flushed so far down the drain. I was like, dude, what are you doing?
Fair, right?
Like,
this is
okay.
So this is the 2021 version because there was already a version in the late 90s.
Yes. Yeah.
Which means that this manga was made in the mid 90s, which explains why.
Okay. Yeah.
The show went this route because I think if you wanted to fight another spirit right away, I think it would make sense for the main character to fight someone who's already OP and lose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. But the power of friendship, the things I hated, and this is typical of a lot of shonen.
Yeah.
I don't believe when a character has a singular purpose.
Yes.
That drives. Okay. A non-compelling singular purpose that drives a lot of their actions. So the nemesis this episode, I don't know his name. His sole desire is to see the stars, right?
Yeah.
I was like, what kind of bullshit desire is that drives you to have spirits and beat other spirits?
He's like, he's like, like there's too much light pollution. It's like, my dude, you were dressed in a fucking suit that's like made from like industrialization to the max. Like glittering. It's like, dude, like chill the fuck out, man. Like,
I think this episode too did so much telling. There's so much talking.
Yeah.
There was action, but there's a lot of talking during the action.
It's like explaining like, like the guy literally explains, haha, this is why you have to submit blah blah. It's like, dude, okay, how about instead of just like going through like, like a Yu-Gi-Oh card text and like explaining every tiny little thing, like you're trying to sell a toy, like how about instead of doing that, just like have something happen and then like show it. Like it's just like, nope, like it's just like shitty dialogue, and it just pissed me off so much. Like I said, this is one show where I stuck out my neck for it, saying that I saw potential, and it let me down like crazy. And
I'm proud that you're being honest about where you stand now.
Man, that's some bullshit.
All right, at number 28 is Blue Reflection Ray. Went down 2 spots. I gave it a 5. You gave it a 4. 4 rolling average 4.38. Let's see, Blue Reflection Ray. So I think my score actually went up. Funny enough, by 0.5. I thought there was more character development meant this time around.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that it was a little bit slow because it ended with the upcoming fights, but there's no fighting whatsoever in this episode. It's just like, they spent a lot of time with character development and who these people are and stuff like that, but not as compelling. Animation is okay at best. I'm not really vibing with the way the artist style, art style. It was cool when they did the battle sequences. I thought the animation there was really cool. And, like, it was trippy, but it was really nice to look at. Because that didn't exist, it was kind of meh in terms of animation.
Yeah. I will say for me personally, my gripe with this one was just that like there is finally now some development, but I just felt like it's like this is like, like I get that like the Mahou Shoujo is like a genre, but it's like to me it's like it is like, in my opinion, like just like the most like drab, like 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 you feel negative emotions, and negative emotions can be bad, like, and like they just take this like really simple thing, and like the whole entire show is supposed to be a symbolic representation, almost, shall I say, a little bit kind of like a what was that show that we were talking about last week, where it's like Skimpy Lolita's IRL movie that was like, them in the dream sequence and dream. Yeah, Sucker Punch. Like, it's like if you're gonna do like a Sucker Punch-esque type of movie where like, like everything's supposed to reflect like the the action is supposed to reflect like some sort of like, like human condition aspect, like please don't make it so like just drab and just and so like to me it was just kind of like, I see where this fight is about to go, and I just do not give a crap about it. Like it's kind of like my gripe was just like, like it's just literally, like I said, like negative emotions, and emotions are scary type of thing. Like
I think that the fault with the Mahou Shoujo, because I think I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, Mahou Shoujo really is designed for kids to watch. I don't say it all the time, not all the time, because Fairy Ranmaru is also for kids, but clearly it's also Mahou Shoujo, but it's clearly not for kids.
Like that shit is
but it's very, I think they focus too much on the emotional aspect that it doesn't become real anymore. And it's not symbolic anymore when it's already a symbol. Right?
Like it's exactly like a symbolic thing that the enjoyment of it's supposed to be like, oh man, like look at this IRL parallel, and then you're supposed to use the action sequence to almost do a commentary on like this what it's supposed to mirror, and like it just feels like it's not gonna be there for this, and that's just why like it just, I kind of had a gripe with it.
At number 29, yeah, went down 10 spots. Is Seven Knights Revolution Hero Successor. I gave it my lowest score, which is an
Yeah.
8. That's why it's highlighted in red. And you gave it a score of 4 for a rolling
Yeah.
average of 4.25. So, because I gave it the lowest score, let me go say
Okay.
my piece first.
Okay.
I had optimism from
Yeah.
the week 1 episode.
Yes.
Kind of like how you have
Yeah.
optimism with Shaman King.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is really cool. I like the system, the battle
Yeah.
system. I'll see where this goes. This episode was so tropey. It's so cliche.
Yeah.
There's
It's
so many things going on that I was like, that's not real. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is from a video game, which explains half
okay.
of this.
Yeah.
So here are my gripes. One of them was the librarian. So
Yeah. Oh my
Sophia,
god. Yeah.
when the monster dethaws,
Yeah.
and you could see people running away.
Okay, yeah.
Sophia and 2 other students are just staring at it,
Yeah.
like screaming. I'm like,
Yeah.
just run away like everyone else. I don't understand why you're not running away. Number 2, his head, the dragon's head, gets split
Yeah.
in 2, and they're like, oh my goodness, it's stronger now. I was like, why is splitting his head makes him stronger? I don't understand.
Yeah, it's like shitty video game mechanics. Like,
And then the main character, right? He's like, I'm gonna join to help you fight because someone has a fight for you. I was like,
yeah, yeah, dude. It's
so
like,
he repels off of the light post and he
Yeah.
goes underneath the dragon and he
Yeah.
stabs him with a dagger. I'm
Yeah.
like, what the hell is this dagger supposed
yeah,
to do? It's
it
like,
like does
just
nothing.
standing
Like,
there.
you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
it just like does
And
nothing.
And he was encouraging the guy, the
Yeah.
ice guy, and
Yeah.
he's like, okay, I'm helping you. Like, you gotta freeze him. From where? From where I cut him with the dagger.
Yeah.
I'm like, why does it have to do it?
Yeah.
That makes no
Like,
sense.
it's already
Like,
exposed. Like, the dagger literally did like jack shit. It was like,
no, yeah,
yeah,
it was already bleeding.
yeah.
It doesn't bleed anymore, and then for some odd reason, that's where the area the ice cream starts.
Yeah.
Like, I understand.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I need to.
I've
now.
exposed
I
a
need
weak-
to fade
yeah,
a
yeah,
blow.
yeah.
Here's the weak spot attack.
Yeah.
No, I need to freeze it. So let me freeze it
Yeah.
at this place.
Yeah.
So like, I don't understand this show's logic.
Yeah, it's like ridiculous. Like, okay, like let me put it like this. This was like is like Shaman King where a thing where it's like, oh, like there's two okay, like the optimism that we saw from last week was, okay, you have a system where there is technically 2 entities. And in my mind, it's like, oh, like you can explore this idea behind, you know, like who you are as a person and who you want to be, or in this case, who you want to be being represented, you know, by like the hero that you succeed or whatever. And like literally, it's just like, haha, like we do this because we're a hothead. Get it? I'm cold, but like we're a hothead. And then other ones like we are courageous. And then like, okay, like so if you have literally no substance elsewhere, like please at least make the fighting mechanics make sense. And just like the way Minatsu was talking about, like, okay, if the fighting mechanics are the only thing that are left and they don't make jack sense, like it's just like there's nothing left for me to enjoy. And it just like was like just super shitty. I'm just like, yeah, like this is like, out of curiosity, this wasn't the other show that you were talking about where people said they really liked it? Was it this one?
Not.
Oh,
We have
oh.
2 shows left, I believe, right?
Oh,
This is, one
no.
of them. And you already kind of know which one
Oh,
it is.
fuck.
So, coming up next, unless you have more things to say, is Higahiro at number 30. Dropped 4 spots. We both gave it a 4
Okay,
for a
yeah.
rolling average of 13. And this was the show that was high up in the charts.
Oh my god, fucking you. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I personally believe this is one of the most Okay, I'm not saying it's the worst show.
Yeah.
But it is one of the more overhyped shows in my opinion. Like people are calling the main character, the main female character, I forget her name here. Sayu.
Yeah. Okay.
Like the waifu of the season. I'm like,
Jesus.
what the fuck? Waifu
Oh
of the
my
season?
gosh, like
Hell
yeah, like
no.
okay, like this is like
She
I'm
does
just
nothing.
yes, okay.
Absolutely
She's first of
nothing.
all a passive character. So what do you mean waifu? Okay, literally. Okay, I'm gonna just go on a little tiny bit of a rant. Not everyone who watches anime is like cringy, like you know, just doesn't understand IRL stuff. That's not to say that everyone who watches anime and you know like is a crazy follower is necessarily like this, but I will say that just from what I've seen online, plenty of people who do get a little bit, you know, like crazily immersed into the world of anime and stuff have a zero understanding of IRL and are blinded by this idealism. And it's like, okay, you guys want to have a pet, right? She is a pet. She was literally a pet this episode. She didn't do anything, and now she's being called waifu of this season because she is a convenient pet for you to be able to come home to, and she has big titties, and that's like what's supposed to be great. And it's just like, dude, like, what is going? Like, guys, like, come on, like,
Okay,
I'm
who's your waifu of this season? If you
I
have
don't
to name
even.
one right now.
I don't even know like what a waifu of the season would be. Like
It
okay,
has.
like
I think the
okay,
only strong female character as of right now. Okay,
yeah,
there's multiple, but I
okay,
would give
okay.
it to the main character from 86.
Okay, yeah. So the main character from 86, I guess, is like, like a complex enough of a character. This isn't even
Yeah.
what you would call waifu. Okay, this isn't what you would
No.
call okay, this isn't what you would call waifu by any of the, the people who are pathetic enough to go into the whole waifu thingamajig. But like the main character's mom in those Snow White notes is a very interesting character as a
Yeah.
foil relatively. So like there's some character complexity there. Like I said, once again, doesn't fall into like your prototypical definition of a waifu, but I feel like she's also like an interesting character that foils, like incredibly foils the other people that are there. So that's interesting. But yeah, this like I said, like she literally okay, I'm sorry, Sayu does nothing this episode. She like the fact that you guys want and are calling it the waifu of the season means you guys just
Yeah.
want to have a pet with titties. Like it's just like please, like stop. Like oh my gosh, like it's
Yeah.
just
So here's my notes. Now
yeah,
that I
yeah,
think we should talk about the
yeah,
show now
yeah,
because
yeah,
we're
okay, yeah,
expanding
yeah,
on what Reddit believes. So
yeah.
I'm not sure. Is the main character's job? Is he a coder, a
I'm
programmer?
not even sure if he's actually a coder. It's
Because
not. It's not 100. Okay, go ahead.
the way that he interacts with well, I need to get better with names, but
Okay,
with
yeah,
his coworker,
yeah,
who's
his
wearing
coworker.
the
That
green
yeah,
sweater here.
yes, mm-hmm.
That's not how coding works. When someone makes a
Yeah,
mistake, you don't yell out,
yeah,
on
yeah,
hey, you
yeah,
made a mistake.
yeah, yeah,
That's a toxic workplace.
yeah,
I think the main character during some of the scenes shows very high emotional
yeah,
intelligence,
yeah.
and there are some ways he approaches things where I think is very smart. But sometimes I think he's dense and makes me not believe the character as much.
No,
Like
it's like there's like
if you have this much high EQ, I don't understand
yeah,
how you can be dense sometimes.
yeah. No, like it's like okay, like let me tell you like this, okay? The fact that like this show really puts down the edge. Okay, there's a famous Twitch, I guess like like quote unquote live stream failed circulating clip where essentially a guy says to another streamer, oh like women are like cats, like when you are just like not doing so well, whatever, the cat wants absolutely nothing to do with you, but the moment you're starting to be content with kind of the way that you are, all of a sudden the cat wants to be all up in your business, and girls are like that. It's like ha 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 ha, funny funny funny. They take this concept, okay, like it's supposed to be just like it's supposed to be like a kick w, like just
Yeah.
funny moment, it's like exaggerated, it's funny because it's ridiculous. They take that concept now and they put it in the show where it's all of a sudden it's like, oh, they now that he has like now that he starts grooming himself, all of a sudden I want to throw myself at him. It's just like to me it's like this is written by like
Yeah.
it's like it's written by like this. Okay, I'm not gonna say, okay, like once again, I just a message for every one of you guys, like emotional health is important, and yes, you will be more attractive when you have your shit together in order. I'm not gonna argue with that, but this whole like I feel like this just reeks of like a mangaka who has absolutely no actual interactions with the real world. And so sometimes, like to reference what Nats was talking about earlier, this character which at moments has extremely high EQ, like like that type of thing, all of a sudden takes like 20 steps backwards because of some like random ass weird shit that he throws himself into, and then all of a sudden gets flustered over whatever. It's just like, dude, like Jesus, like it just feels like it's a story about relationships written by a guy that doesn't know how IRL works at all. And it's just like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
just don't understand. So it seems like the girl Goto-san, the person
yeah,
that he asked out, is
yeah.
interested in him, but I don't understand what it is, right?
Yeah,
I'm,
it's like
I'm missing
it's
so many
like
points here.
yeah, it's like oh, like essentially, right? Essentially, the way this show has set it up to this point is that oh, she wasn't interested at all. She was using him to get a meal last time, right? And then now this
Yeah.
time, oh hey, he has something going on. Now I wanna like I'll get up in his business. Just like that's not how shit works. Okay, yeah,
Yeah, but
okay,
I do agree that there are scenarios that can
yes,
play out like that.
yes,
So I'll give that the benefit
yeah.
of the doubt. But
It's
in
just
general, very
yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah, like I said, like don't like just as a general message, like yeah, like when you have more of your stuff together in order, like it is an attractive and people will want to hang out, more likely to want to hang out with you. There is a level of curiosity that goes on, and like I said, the Twitch clip that I was mentioning earlier, where it's like, haha, women are like cats. It's like it's funny because there is a small element of that has like a little bit of truth to it, and that's why like people are memeing about it, and like it's supposed to be funny. I will say this just right off the bat, like no, this isn't some sort of Chad universe where a Chad like like you either have absolutely nothing or one guy. The moment he starts to get something, all of a sudden just gets all the women. Like that's like please, like just please, like stop. Like this isn't how the world works. Like yeah, like Sayu as a character just like pissed me off so much because she was literally a pet this episode. Like did absolutely nothing when she's supposed to be like
so
another main character. Okay.
I found the ranking.
Okay.
So this is the
All right.
top 10 anime of the week.
Holy
Week one.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's some shows that have
Okay,
higher
okay,
ranking at
yeah.
this point, but here's week one. Number one, Higehiro.
Oh my gosh. Oh
Number
my
2,
god.
86. I'm like, okay, 86 number
Yeah,
2,
yeah.
not bad. Number 3, To Your Eternity. I'm like,
Oh
whoa.
god. Okay, yeah. This is
This
like
is just episode 1. And then
yeah.
everything else is like whatever. Number
Okay.
4, which is high on this list, but that we don't have, is
Yeah.
Tokyo Revengers.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So
I
I
just
mean
wanted
that.
to highlight
Yeah.
the top 3.
Yeah. And it's just one of the things where like yeah I'm sorry I'm gonna go in a little bit on you, shall I say, not so well adjusted people who are super into this stuff. Like please, like it's just like my best suggestion is like we are born into a reality and this is our reality. There's not going to be another Eastgate reality that you get into. Like please start to understand how some of this stuff works. Like I think the fact that this was legitimately touted as number 1 and the fact that this, like I said, this pet with titties was your number 1 waifu is just like a big red flag. It's like guys, like this isn't how this shit works. This is like yeah, like it's just oof. Yeah, it's just definitely triggering me a little as you can see. Yeah,
But I mean, it's not the worst show
yeah.
on this list. And
it is not the worst show. The worst show, the award goes to.
Battle Athletes Victory Restart. Funny enough, at number 31, it's the lowest, but it did go up one.
Yeah, they go up because there are now less shows to be reviewed, and
Yes,
so
correct.
it'll go.
I gave it a 3.5. You gave it a 3, which is your lowest score this week, for a rolling average of 3.63. You can go first since you gave it the lowest score.
This is a show where once again a weird focus on the bodies of prepubescent girls gets like elevated a lot this episode for no reason. Not necessarily no reason, almost like a creepy. Okay, it's like the focus somehow
became with the
okay, yeah, it is, yeah,
guys
like
in suits.
yeah, the guys in suits, and they're like, oh, look at this body, like, why are you even competing? You should just become like a fuck doll. It's like, okay, I get that, like, you want to like set up like, oh, there's some evil, whatever. Number 1, it comes off as incredibly like characterized evil, where it's like, look at this one dimensional, like, it's just evil. And then number 2, the only substance that you had that wasn't directly somewhat creepily focused on these prepubescent girls' bodies are like the fact that it's like, oh, like I don't like it because, you know, I'm not who we're trying to be, and they have a little, like, emotional spat, and then it gets resolved in, like, 2 minutes, and it's just, like, some, like, fucking bullshit. By a race where she goes, haha, look it, we should be best friends now because I didn't make you fall to your death. Woohoo, that's crazy, guys. Yeah. Yo, that shit crazy. It's like, dude, like, really? Like, it's just like, dude, like, okay, like I said, once again, like, it's a show where I don't know, like I said, like, it's like, it's like the Nickelodeon like weird fixation on underage people. Like it's literally that, and then they took that a little even further than I would have liked it to. And then the only thing that they showed outside of that creepy fixation was just so vapid that I was just like, yeah, this is some dumb crap, and that's why it got my lowest score of 3.
Yeah, I thought the emotional moments were so cliche.
Yeah.
I thought. So the one big action sequence that you didn't touch on was that car explosion.
Okay.
I thought that was very predictable.
Yeah.
Like, super predictable. I mean, I think it does add an element to.
Somebody's
what's
like,
going on. I mean, there's something that's going on in the background that I still have no idea what's going on. Like, it could be like, oh, whatever this group is doing is they're going against this competition.
Yeah.
Competition is right. If that's the case, cool. I like that. Yeah. Right? Because you were talking about how this.
It's like this creepy fixation. Yeah. It's like this creepy fixation.
But the fact that we don't know what the cause of these terrorists are, right? We don't know what they are, and all we know so far is the car explosion. It's like, okay, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just, oh gosh, like I said, like, it's like they finally introduced something that wasn't the creepy focus, and it was just so bad that I was like, there's nowhere much for this show to go, and that's why it got my lowest score of the week.
Yeah, and that is the end of the list. So if you go on to the next slide.
All right.
We have the drop list. So we have Cestus, Fairy Ranmaru, To Your Eternity, Pretty Boy Detective Club. I want to make what's it called? I want to make a bug too.
Yeah, or let's make a bug.
Shaman King, Blue Reflection Ray, Seven Knights, Higehiro, and Battle Athletes. So because John went first last week, I'm gonna go first this week. Again, This is the last week where each of us will be dropping 2 shows.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we'll use our perk. Again, as a reminder, we each have an additional drop and an additional save.
Yeah. So those will be exercised if deemed appropriate. But yeah.
yes. So for me, since I knew I was going first, there was one show that I was definitely gonna drop,
Okay.
and you already know what it is because
Yeah.
I gave it the lowest score, and it's gonna
Yeah.
be Seven Nights.
Yeah. That
I
stuff.
am dropping Seven Nights.
That shit is oof. Like it's just I don't yeah, it's just yikes.
Yeah, I am not interested enough for it to
Yeah.
show. I think there are other shows here where it's like, sure, they're in the bottom list, but I'm still mildly interested to see what happens. Seven Nights is not going to be one of those shows. At least for me.
Alrighty. The one that I am going to drop is Blue Reflection Ray. I
Alright.
thought that, yeah, I mean, it was I will say, objectively speaking, the most uninterested one that I was in the list that I am to continue to watch. Not to say that it was worse than some of the other shows. Some of these other shows, like our ranting, was pretty bad, but I was almost entertained by. Okay, I was not bored by my lack of, my anger with this shows. This one is just a particular level of apathy where it just goes like, damn, like I'm bored. I don't want to watch this anymore. Like that was yeah.
Okay, so we dropped those two. Okay. Well, I think this. Okay, I thought this week might be difficult, but I think it might be
Okay.
easier.
Yeah.
The show that I'm gonna drop will be Battle Athletes.
Okay. Yes, that one is just
I think it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's just too slow, and I have an inkling what you might drop.
Okay.
Let's see if it's true.
Okay. All right. And the last one that I am going to slash off this list. Oh man, I have a toss up between two that I really want to slash.
There's one that's just worse.
Oh.
Even though it might hurt you, I know.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. We're dropping Shaman King. That's
yeah.
Yeah. We're dropping Shaman King.
I think you're considering. Which one were you considering?
Fairy Ranmaru was the one that I was considering. Yeah. But this one, like I said, the Shaman King, like, it's just, oh my gosh, like, dude,
and
like,
it could be a problem with it could be the problem with the shonen genre and this gauntlet rules, right?
Yeah, it could be.
If you watch everything, because this is gonna be a multi-season show, it could be a beautiful thing, but in the context of what this show kind of wants, maybe not the best anime.
Yeah, like maybe not the best anime. It's just like, oh, okay. And then like just to top off like the cringe factor, hey, like girl introduces like herself into the thing instantly. The first thing she labels herself as is like as a wife. I'm just like, come on, guys. Like, whatever. I'm just like, come on, guys. Like it's just it's okay. Let me put it like this: like a shonen. Okay. When I look back on Naruto, I will fully admit that maybe the reason I did enjoy it was because I was genuinely at the age demographic where, Sasuke dealing with a curse mark was enough substance for me to be like, oh yes, this is a shit, and maybe that's why I liked it. Maybe there is an element to this too, where like maybe like like shonen literally correct me if I'm wrong. What is shonen directly translating to? Young boy, right? Or like young man or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, is it? Yeah. And so like, the fact that this is a shonen, like maybe like, like the target demographic just isn't aligning up, and, like it's maybe the simplicity is by design and all that. But yeah, it was just, to me, it's like, it's almost like I have an extra level of salt that I gave this show like a little bit of like potential last week.
Yeah,
and it just like,
fair.
it dropped it and just crushed it like crazy. But yeah, it's just,
I chose to only 7 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, so those are the 4 shows, and now we go on to additional perk drops, and I will actually be using my perk
Ooh, okay, alrighty.
I've realized if I don't use it now, I will be too. I won't use it because at that point I feel like I'm too dedicated.
Yeah.
I should just might as well watch.
Okay.
And the show that I'm gonna drop, and I think might surprise you.
Okay.
Is going to be Cestus.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just because I think the CG is horrible.
Yeah.
I think the character development's there, but I don't know if I can stand watching this again. It's just the mouths also just don't.
Yeah, like it's just. Oh, okay. I'll let me put it like this, okay? When you can somehow piss me off with a guy literally walking around in circles. Okay, that's all he's doing, and somehow that alone can piss you off. Like, boy, does your animation just like lack like crazy. It's like that should have been like just such a like that should have been unnoticeable, right? And somehow you managed to make something that was supposed to be super trivial all of a sudden just like so shit is just oh my goodness, like please stop. Yeah, I'll be super honest and say that there is a tiny part of me that's a little bit tempted to use the drop, but I will be choosing to abstain to use a drop this week. But yeah, these are all animes that are on the bottom of the drop list for a good reason. And
Yeah.
yeah, like
So now comes, do we want to utilize your saves? And so I'm gonna go first.
okay,
Of all the shows that are dropped, I'm
yeah,
most tempted to save Blue Reflection Ray just because
okay,
I like this idea. But
okay,
I don't think it's worth the save, so I
okay,
will not be using my save. How
yeah.
about you?
I will not use the save either. I will say that although Cestus, like I said, the characters, like I said, like a weirdly decent amount of character development for supposedly like a
Yeah.
Jason Statham style of stuff. Still not worth it. Like I'm just gonna be honest. Like okay, like Mrs. Pompeii shows up. Like that's a lot for the genre, but it's still very little, and that's not worth like watching it. And yeah, like the if the focus is supposed to be fighting, and like my gosh, I get visual ocular cancer from watching this stuff. It's like yeah, I need to stop. Like it's just like
Yeah.
I can't do it. Yeah, none of these other shows are yeah, like it's definitely not worth saving. The Cestus one is the only one I would even potentially think of using it, and
Yep.
I agree on the ocular cancer angle. I'm not gonna continue to try to
Yep.
salvage that one.
Yep. Exactly.
Alrighty.
Let's see if the next slide has updated. Just try it. No, I'll go ahead and try to
Okay.
back
Yeah. Let me see.
in. This shows
Oh yeah, it works now. Okay. All right. I
perfect.
think it does.
All right,
Okay.
so this is our current status. You'll notice all the shows from last week that we grayed out and the shows that we grayed out this week. So, I mean, overall, I think there's still a lot of amazing shows. And again, starting next week, we'll have a different format. Um,
Yeah.
you can go to the
There's.
next slide, actually.
Oh, okay. All right.
I actually updated this since I wasn't
Okay.
actually planning on using it on my actual
Okay.
job, but I was looking at the list. I was like,
Yeah.
I feel like
Okay.
probably
Yeah.
says this.
Okay.
So tonight we had 31 shows, and we didn't drop 4, we dropped 5.
Yeah.
So next week there's only going to be 26 shows that we're watching. We're only dropping 2 again, and then for the rest of the gauntlet we're going to be dropping 2. But we're adding Yasuke, which is why in week 4 instead of it going to 24 shows, it'll be 25 shows.
Yep. Okay. Alrighty, yeah. Overall, there's still a pretty decent amount of animes out there. Some with definitely some pretty good potentials. If you had to check out just one series this week, please do check out. Let me make sure. Vivi Flore Eyes Song. Make sure
Yeah,
you do
I
check
agree.
that one
I
out.
agree.
That one is definitely the highlight. It is incredible. It brings a lot of great qualities and many different aspects, and at the very least you will be left with, in my opinion, based on the trajectory, at worst a very interesting take on the
Premise.
future. Yeah, like a future, like at the very worst you will still have an incredible premise that is worth entertaining alone just as is. I will say that yeah, the character developments that happened in this episode were just, I did not expect them to be there, and they were there. They exceeded my expectations. So yeah, if you had to just pick one show to watch this week, watch Vivi Flores Ice Song. It will not let you down. Some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, and so yeah, that's the end of week 2. Thank you for joining us again. We're gonna do this the same time next week. If you want to support us, you can support us either by just following us on Twitch, looking at our YouTube videos, and also supporting us on Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/theanimepodcast. We're thinking about ways to kind of integrate a community, a Discord
Yeah.
community to this. We're brand new, so we're not
Yeah.
expecting a lot of things right now. But if you have any ideas of what things we should do, just let us know on the comments on Twitch, on Patreon, or on YouTube as well.
Yep.
Um, yeah.
Alrighty.
Other than that, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're just listening to this via audio, and continue watching anime, and because we definitely will be as we go into week 3 next week.
Alrighty. Thank you. See y'all next week.
Good night.